Commando!
This is me playing on my first ZX Spectrum in 1989. Having film of yourself playing computer games from that era is extremely rare. James Rolfe, a prominent YouTuber, has footage of himself unwrapping and playing on his Nintendo in 1988.
That's me, staring at a fresh Nintendo Entertainment System, right out of the box.
Between 1987 and 1992, I owned 4 ZX Spectrum computers. All were second-hand and died due to different electrical issues, such as the power pack catching fire, or from short-circuiting, because I inserted the incorrect peripheral. They were all purchased at Camrose Car Boot in Basingstoke. In the 1980s, many people purchased Spectrums but then swapped or upgraded them for Commodores, Amstrads, BBCs, or Atari systems. The main reason for the swap to a cartridge system was because they hated the load times of tape-based systems. In the 1980s, used Spectrums and Spectrum games were regularly available at the local car boot. None of my friends possessed a Spectrum. Instead, they owned Ataris or Commodores. Only my cousins had a Spectrum, but they were utterly stingy and would never swap or allow me to borrow games. One evening, my now estranged father and his stupid best friend arrived back at our house drunk from the pub. The drunken commotion and the scent of fish and chips had jolted me awake. When I came out of my bedroom due to the ruckus, I noticed that they also had something on the dining table. There were 6 black bin bags, all full of cassette tapes, boxes and promotional material. Due to the late hour and my mother's displeasure with my father's behavior, I was promptly instructed to return to bed. When I woke up the next morning, my father had already departed for work. I went to the dining table to see what they were doing the night before. I carefully carried everything to my room after realizing it was a computer. My bedroom already possessed my family's old black and white TV. It was one of those TVs that had a large circular metallic channel switch on the right-hand side. I correctly constructed the computer, despite not having an instruction manual and being just 6 years old. I then stuck a random tape into the cassette player. After a while, I saw writing inside a cassette case. It stated to load a game, type load and 2 quotation marks. When I typed the text into the computer and pushed enter, the game began to load. I was originally frightened, due to my lack of understanding of what was going on with the screen, topped by the strange abrasive, high-pitched sound. I braced myself and let it go anyhow. A loading screen appeared, and the game started after 3 to 5 minutes. Jetpack was that first video game I ever played. When my father returned home, he was surprised to discover that I had managed to put it together and was playing many games. Because my father and his friend were unable to set up the computer. The computer became mine since I appeared to have a natural affinity for technology. My ability to solve complex puzzles resulted in me being enrolled in the gifted and talented program at school during the 80s. My favorite Spectrum was the +2 model, which had a built-in cassette recorder. My least favorite was the original ZX Spectrum. I hated the feel and feedback from the rubber buttons during gameplay. It's hard to have a complete list of the games I possessed back then. The reason was each time my father came back with a new Spectrum for me, he would also bring a bin bag full of games from the previous owner. After playing the mountains of games, I discovered a common theme, this being that some game developers or publishers produced way superior games. Back then there was no internet and the only way to really find out if a game was good was to read magazines and try out the free demos. Those days the gaming press was on the side of the consumer. These days no one trusts the gaming press because they've been caught out too many times, in the pockets of developers for kickbacks or personal gain. Back then what magazines said would influence most people's purchases. The games I ultimately decided to buy with my own pocket money mainly came from the following companies. Ultimate Play the Game, Ocean Software, US Gold, Codemasters, Kix, Firebird and Elite Systems were my trusted brands. I was hesitant to purchase any games that did not bear one of these brands or didn't have a Crash Magazine recommendation badge. Only reviews or demos in Spectrum magazines convinced me to purchase a game that wasn't made by one of my trusted brands. In the 1980s, my weekly pocket money was about 50p, but by the 1990s, it was closer to £2.50. In the 1980s and 1990s, having a big family, I would receive £30 to £40 for Christmas or my birthday. That's about £100 to £150 in today's money. For the Chinese, that's 930 to 1,400 yuan. Timeline overview. I received my second-hand Spectrum Plus in 1987, at the age of 6 years old. That version came out in October 1984, so it was just over 2 years old. Between 1990 and 1992, there was a significant wave of budget re-releases, multi-game tape combos, and complete box sets. Then, suddenly, many retail outlets stopped carrying tape games. I remember that certain games that shops were attempting to get rid of for as little as £1.50. Large box sets were selling for between £10 to £20, and I would estimate that the average price I paid for a single budget game was about £2 to £4. I had to save at least 2 weeks' worth of pocket money or more during those 5 years if I wanted to purchase a game. Sometimes I couldn't wait and decided to buy a magazine instead, mostly for the opportunity to play the free demonstrations. I would say I made most my purchases in 1991. End of part 1.
As it should always be, the foundlings are the future. This is the way.
This is the way. This is the way.